If you're tossing food scraps, you're literally throwing away free gold for your garden. And here's the kicker. Most people compost wrong and it's ruining their soil. In this video, I'm going to show you the best 4 ways in which to compost, and I'm going to give you 3 tactics that you can use to cut decomposition time in half, and 1 mistake that 90% of gardeners make. And at the end, I'll show you the ultimate composting method that even organic farms swear by. A method so powerful that it could even stop you using fertilizers forever. Let's dive in. I'm Tony O'Neill and this is Simplified Gardening. First, let's talk about why composting is a game changer for your garden and the planet. And there are 3 reasons in which we're going to cover. The first reason is compost is fantastic for adding to your garden because it feeds the soil. It improves aeration, it improves water retention, and it feeds all the microbiology that's in your soil and the other soil life. This in turn then provides nutrients for your plants to grow. Soil that has compost added, well, this provides stronger plants that are better to fight off disease, they fight off pests, and they grow healthier and stronger. So it's really good for adding to the ground. Number 2, it saves you money and it stops producing waste from your garden because you can turn this into compost. All of the waste from your garden, all of your kitchen scraps, all get put into this compost. The average family, it actually throws away 400 pounds in weight of kitchen scraps a year. So you can turn that into a free fertilizer for your garden. It's not going off to landfill. It's not contributing to greenhouse gases at landfills where the methane goes or anything like that. So it's fantastic. And number 3, you're helping with climate change because 30% of what goes off to landfill, well, it rots in landfill and it could be composted. When it's rotting in landfill, it produces huge amounts of methane gas, much more than would ever be produced in a home composting system. And then on top of that, you're helping to reduce that methane and the carbon footprint as well. So let's go step by step through the 4 composting methods so that you can find the right one for you. So the first method is the traditional composting pile or these composting bays, and it's great for larger gardens, but it can take a little bit longer to break down and requires a lot of work when turning this sort of volume, but it's fantastic for such big gardens. How to set it up? Well, you require a minimum of 3 foot by 3 foot. So whether that's a pile that's on the ground or whether it's in a bay like this, you want a minimum of 3 foot square. And you just layer your greens and browns as you build the pile, watering in between to make sure that all of the contents is moist. Greens can be anything from kitchen scraps, yard waste, or grass clippings, and browns can be anything like straw, cardboard or leaves. And you layer these out and you want to moisten it down so it's like a wrung out sponge. Ideally you should only be able to grab a handful and squeeze it, and at the most 1 drop comes out of it. Better if it's none. You should be able to then open it, it should remain in a ball in your hand and you should be able to break it up very easily. That's when you know you have the right moisture consistency. It should be turned every couple of weeks, but if you buy yourself a compost thermometer, then you can do even better than that. You can watch the peaks and the troughs, and every time it hits a peak and starts dropping back off, turn it then to introduce more air. That's the perfect time to turn because you're keeping it into that thermophilic layer and it will decompose much quicker for you. And depending on the size and the aeration will depend on how quick you get to compost, and you can get it in as little as 28 days, but typically a pile of this size will take between 3 to 6 months. Next up we have the Dalek style composting bins or the tumblers. Now these are fantastic for smaller gardens, but they do have a limit in the amount of material they can hold, and because of that there's a bit more work involved because you have to turn it more regularly to get that heat up because they don't have the volume. Fill them exactly the same as you would for the bigger ones, in layers, keeping it as small as possible. The smaller you chop up the ingredients for these styles, the better it will decompose and the easier it will be for you to turn it later. When turning it, you want to lift the whole bin off, set it to the side and then shovel that back into the bin. It's much easier than trying to shovel it out or trying to turn it inside with one of these screws or something like that. That's just useless. Take the bin off the top. They're designed to be conical for a reason so that you can lift it off the top, set it to the side and then shovel it back in. If you're using a rotary style bin, then you want to turn that a couple of times every single day. Now when using these, it can be a little bit faster to compost if you are turning it all the time. And if you're turning all the time, it'll typically take between 1 and 3 months for compost out of these units. Next up is number 3. Worm composting, otherwise known as vermicomposting, is a fantastic, easy way in which to turn kitchen scraps and garden waste into a nutrient-rich fertilizer for the garden. It all starts with creating an ideal environment for composting worms, commonly red wriggler worms, so they can thrive and break down food waste quickly. Typically, you'll need a container, often a plastic storage bin with air holes, or a wooden box lined with bedding such as shredded newspaper, coconut coir or partially composted leaves. This bedding provides enough aeration and moisture for the worms to thrive while they break down all of your scraps. It's now time then to add the worms, and typically red wrigglers are used and they will compost down much quicker. Don't use garden or earthworms because they are not composting worms. Put your worms across the surface and allow them to bury in themselves. Don't cover them over and leave them there for 3 days before feeding them, at which point you can then start giving them some food and little amounts of veggie scraps and things for the start until your population grows, and they will turn that into black gold worm castings for you. An added bonus is the moisture that draws out the bottom, and you can pour that out of a tap, is known as worm tea, and this can also be used as a feed for your plants as well. Bokashi composting is the 4th method, and it's a simple way of fermenting down kitchen scraps, dairy and meat anaerobically, and it's fantastic, and it's a really good way if you only have a really small garden, or you have a patio, or you have a balcony or something like that, something small, but you still want to be able to provide your own nutrition. And all you do for this is get a Bokashi bin. It's typically like a small plastic bin with a tap in the bottom and a mesh grill to stop this stuff from going through so that the fluids can drain off. And you layer in your kitchen scraps, your meats or dairy, and you then cover this over with bran. And this bran has been charged with microbes, anaerobic microbes that will start the fermenting process of the Bokashi. You just keep layering this up as you have it, and then you fill it in. Now, there's a couple of points to note here. Mold will form inside this bin, but it's really important that when you finish a layer with your vegetable scraps or whatever it is, that you cover it over with bran to make sure that air doesn't get to it. And then you must close that lid tight so that no oxygen can get in, because this is an anaerobic process, not an aerobic process. You keep doing this till the bin is full, but you'll notice that some molds will form on the inside. If it's a white mold, then it's no problem, it's exactly what's supposed to happen. But if it's a grey or green mold, I would suggest disposing of this in your food waste or something like like that, and let the council deal with it, because we don't want to be introducing that. But typically a nice white mold is no problems at all. There'll be a tap in the bottom. You can drain off the tea for this. It's called bokashi tea, and that can be used like the worm casting tea as a fertilizer for your plants. And after about 2 to 3 weeks, the anaerobic bacteria will have done its job fermenting this waste. Now, you can bury this in the garden in a trench or something like that, and it will continue then rotting down, feeding anaerobically. Or you can do what I do. I add it to my compost piles, my large compost piles, where then aerobic bacteria will take over the process and finish rotting that down, killing off the anaerobic bacteria. So you have multiple options with this. So if you're only doing it for a balcony or something like that, you can just literally put that fermented stuff around your plants. You haven't got to worry about it attracting pests and things, because it's anaerobic. When it went down, it's now fermented. They're not interested in that, okay? But I'll add it to my compost because I've got a bigger garden, and that's how I deal with that. So let's talk about 3 of the biggest composting hack mistakes. And the first one of them is too much greens. That is way too much nitrogen, and it turns into a slimy, smelly mess, and then it turns anaerobic, so it doesn't compost. The fix for this is just to add more browns. Just add tons more browns, mix it up, and it will go aerobic again, and then it will continue composting. Number 2, if your compost smells bad, then turn it. Don't do anything else other than turn it. It's turning anaerobic and it needs more air. So if you turn that compost, then it will stop smelling for you. It shouldn't smell. And the third mistake is getting rodents and pests in your compost. A lot of people make this mistake and they worry that they're going to attract rats. But when you put in any scraps from the kitchen or anything like that, make sure you cover it over with a good layer of carbon. So whether that's leaves, wood chips or straw, put a big layer of carbon on the top like a cap, and that will prevent any pests getting into your compost. Okay, here's 3 hacks for composting. Number 1, cut up all of your ingredients really fine. This will speed up the decomposition. Number 2, make sure you turn your compost. The more you turn it, the more air, the quicker it will decompose. And number 3, use coffee grounds in your compost. This will increase the microbiology in the compost and heat it up quicker. And this will help to decompose it much, much faster as well. And here's a bonus tip for you guys. If you want to compost twice as fast, use an activator, something like some old compost that you've already made, worm castings that are really charged, and you can also buy bioactivators, and these simply add a ton of microbes to the new mix to start it and kickstart it really fast, rather than waiting for them to come in themselves. And if you want to take composting to the next level, where you're understanding the biology around composting, how the microbiology works, how it breaks down the compost, how it produces compost and everything like that, then you want to look at Composting Masterclass, my book, because other guides, they sort of stop at the green and brown layerings. It's a basic overview, but Composting Masterclass, it's a deep delve. It goes into everything that works around the whole microsystems that we have, the ecosystems, such as, you know, what's happening with the hydration, what's happening down in the soil beneath our feet, what all those microbes are doing, how they're producing the feed and things for your plants. It goes into everything in a ton of detail, so you have the science and the know-how, and you'll understand the whole process much better. Composting Masterclass is my book, written by myself a couple of years ago. It's available in the link in the description. This is not a beginner's guide book, okay guys? So if that's what you're looking for, this book isn't for you. But if you want to take your composting to the next level, you need that book. It will really open your eyes. Now you know how to compost the right way, without smells, without pests, and without waiting. So which of these methods do you use, or are you going to use? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to take your composting to the next stage, then this is the next video that you should watch, where I break this down into a really detailed guide for you. I'm Tony O'Neill, this is Simplified Gardening, and I'll see you there. Bye.